Шановні колеги,
Esteemed colleagues, good morning. We are starting our working day in the UCMC. The topic of the first event is a connection to power grids proposals to draft law 4493. Our guests are Dmytro Boyarchuk, USAID Leadership and Economic Governance Program Expert, Oleksiy, Orzhel, Expert of the Better Regulation Delivery Office, and Oleg Palayda, Director of Project Organization, Power Grids and Systems. Thank you all. We are expecting our colleagues to join us, but we will start and we will explain what the problem is about. I am Dmytro Boyarchuk from USAID Leadership and Economic Governance Program. We'll be talking about electric grids, about the problem of connection to grid. We have been working on that for a year and a half. Before us, there were many people who had been working on it, and we would like this problem to be finally addressed so that we don't mention it again. So I will remind you what it is about. Ukrainian business has big problems with that because investor, when faced with this problem, they give advantage. They prefer other jurisdictions. There are many cases when the investor would come and would try to address this problem. They understand that this is unpredictable, and then they go to Belarus or Russia, and they try to avoid Ukraine because of that problem. So what was happening, what has been happening in the last 2.5 years? There is some progress. The experts, the programs like we have come to agreement that this is the best solution in current situation.
Другий момент – це те, що останнім часом навіть НКРЕКП і ліцензіати
The NERC started looking attentively at this problem as well. Potentially, it can become an official position of the NERC.
Але ми розуміємо, що, скажімо, в тих умовах
We understand that the title could be preserved, but the content will be changed. And that is why we invited you to emphasize what are the main things in the model so that you keep eye on these critical issues. Even if the name is preserved, we would like the content to be the same. I would like to invite my colleagues, and they will tell in more details about what we are talking about. Orzhel Oleksiy, Office of Efficient Regulation, the head of the energy sector. First of all, I would like to confirm Dmytro's words that the process is going on which allows to simplify and optimize the procedure of connection. That is a very positive signal. Because we have achieved a certain progress in this very difficult procedure. the issuing of technical requirements, that is the place where there was most corruption. The new concept, there will be no issuing of technical requirements. It will be unified. There will be the rate for capacity and another rate which is needed to get the customer connected to the grid. Within the working group, we were working for a long time, and the concept has been reflected in the draft law 4493 on electric energy market, Article 21. We need to look at what is the content of the article. The main principles are acceptable for the business, but the devil is in details, and we need to look attentively at certain things that my colleagues will mention. Another important thing, which is now perceived as the idea that is supported by the MPs, and that is what business was emphasizing, that is the possibility to compensate the costs for connection to grids to business. Basically, business has always been saying, why should we capitalize Oblenergos at our expense? Because they will be selling electricity to me and will earn money on me. When you want to buy some good, for that you have to build a shop for a salesperson, then go to him and buy this good. So I do have a hope that the idea of return of expenditures of the customer to electric for connection to electric grids via compensation, introducing the stimulating tariff finds its supporters, and this will be the factor which will provide understanding on how the money could be returned to business, and also investors will come to this country and business will start developing. Now I would like to give the floor to the next speaker.
Mr. Oleg Palayda, good morning. I'm director of the design company, which every day deals with that cumbersome procedures. Our specific area is joining to the grid those users who use dozens of megawatts. For them, usually, it's not so important how much they should pay, but what they really need, they need the predictability of all the costs, and for them it's very important to be able to project how much time it will take and how much money it would require. Unfortunately, today we need to improve two things. We have to improve the procedure to make it straightforward and understandable. And the second important thing is to provide clear fees for joining the grid, for connecting to the grid. And in many NGOs, as of today, there are suggestions how these two aspects could be improved, how we can improve the procedure. We can make it transparent as possible. So the potential customer who wishes to be connected to the grid should be able to open the website of Kyivvenergo and on a map indicate the exact location where he needs the grid, and this interactive map should be able immediately to show him how much it will cost and how much time would be needed. Of course, in this procedure, there are some unpredictable moments. For example, the allocation of land plots or the procedure of allocating land for the line, but all the rest aspects are already known. We know how much does it cost to install the grid, to connect, etc. And another important moment is as follows: the customer has to pay only for himself, not for other users. If Kyivvenergo wishes to make more capable part of the grid, which would allow connection of other users, they should do it on its own account, and this will stimulate Kyivvenergo to project for the future and make investments for the future. I think that this solution might become very useful for Ukraine in terms of potential investments and thus drastically increase its competitiveness. Any questions to our speakers? I see there are raised hands. Please mention your name. Krapiva Sergey, Business Newspaper. What's the problem? So what is the message? Is the draft law ready? Is it submitted? What is the problem? The problem is that those procedures which are applied now, they are not favorable for businesses, and they allow a lot of shadow incomes to be got. And our model is called the transparent pricing model, and it is not favored very much by the regulating bodies. As of today, the assessment of costs is based on the price per connecting 1 kilowatt and the cost of connecting the capacity. In order to calculate this last indicator, you should understand many other parameters, and the methodology which is recommended of calculating those parameters suggested by NGOs makes this cost almost equal to the real cost, while the license holders now they offer much higher prices because their system of evaluation is based is asset based. Based on the facilities to be constructed. And we today stand for our optimal cost model to be applied and to be passed in its primary in its primary shape. Today, this year, we had several draft laws about connection to the grids, and they were all repealed. The law on electricity market was passed in spring, and today we have two problems with connection to the grids. We have two types of costs based on the real cost of connection, and the second type of cost is based on evaluation of all the assets of license holder of Kyivstar, and this is a much higher price usually. And the second aspect, possible compensation to the customer of all the costs which will be included into future production.
American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine and Sokolovsky and Partner law firm. I would like to draw attention of the guests, of the presenters to certain important issues. Hearing the questions from the audience, I would like to remind you of the legislative norms which are to be executed. First of all, the law in energy market, and that's on the responsibility of the transmitters to or so-called the law on distributing electricity. And the second one is the law on monopolies, which has such a notion as stimulating regulation, according to which there should be the mechanism stimulating investments. My question to you is, analyzing the norms of the draft, does this law provide for the responsibility of the systems of distribution for distribution, and is there do they provide for attraction of indirect investments? Because investments mean not just financing the operators of the systems of distribution, but also getting some profit or achieving some social effect. So is that provided for? If not, then what do you suggest? Thank you for your question. In fact, today Oblenergo were developing via investment programs, via the plans of the development of grids. They are there. Some Oblenergos have them on their website. But the problem was that not always Oblenergo would respond to the requirements of the business. These processes sometimes would coincide, sometimes they were split away. But once we are talking about stimulating tariff, making Oblenergo should understand itself where they should develop and they shouldn't be trying to get most of the expenditures in their own investment program, because the consumer will pay for everything. Talking about the low natural monopolies, there's a position as to stimulating tariffication in relation to natural monopolies. We had just 6 pilot organizations which are now switched to RAB regulation, and that is happening with not enough rate of return, and there's a big question of what should this rate of return be, depending on the capital which was invested in Soviet times and recently. So a new law 4493 talks about stimulating tariffication, and 4493 should become the big basic law on the electricity market. If we follow that law, the consumer will get more high quality services, and the provider of services will be developing. Also, we need to understand that the expenditures created within the connection, they are transferred to the balance of Oblenergo, because everyone agrees that we shouldn't be building vertical monopolies, consecutive monopolies, sorry. There's a whole chain which exists now, and because very often you cannot come to terms with the owner, you have to build a new line next to the existing line. So the future consumer will pay for the service of connection, but the electricity transmitting organizations will put it to a new asset base. In the result, Oblenergo will be earning on that, and from that money they have to return the expenditures for connection. This is sort of a form of a loan for building this shop where you need to go to buy products. The consumer will be able to receive money back, basically. Unfortunately, the interpreters cannot hear. Are you suggesting that, or is that the mechanism which is already in the draft law? We need to understand what should be the priority mechanism of financing. Is it at the expense of investments? Is it in the form of payment for connection, or as a component for tariff for the tariff for electricity? I will say a couple of words. This compensation, development of networks will take place. It will be including both. Again, the interpreters cannot hear. That the development of the grid is the general development, and the last mile is what the consumer needs. Like, for example, the grid is 10 kilometers away from a point of entry, and 200, 300 meters, the last 200, 300 meters, that's the final mile. And there are many proposals that we hear in the working group. They are not included into the draft law. You as an expert in technical sphere, you're saying correctly that the last mile is regulated in the draft. But I draw your attention because you are executing this project that to build the line, the transmission line, to is possible to ensure the requirements of the consumer. And if the construction of such grids leads to creation of big reserve of capacity, this will increase the financial burden on one consumer of services. To say that some consumer needs it would be wrong. If you want to get 100 kilowatt,
який буде забезпечувати приєднання подальших замовників. Тому я вважаю, що це питання важливе.
then you need a certain cross-section. I wouldn't use the word abuse, because our monopolists act within the legislation.
They work this way, and it looks like they work in line with the legislation. Development of grids and the connection to the grids, they are similar, but they are not equivalent. The development of grids actually means the upgrading or renovation of old and very grids. Many grids are various of today. But alongside with this, we have a lot of regions where the grids are available, but they should be renovated. And development means actually the renovation of the very grids. Connection means that this is absolutely new object which is intended to be connected, not waiting for further development during some recent years. Actually, you are right. Those money coming as fees for connection and allocated for development should be accumulated on two different accounts. Unfortunately, the investment program developed by the regulator is insufficient. What we suggest, the customer will pay for the facility which is needed for connection, and on the same time allows for accumulation of funds on the account intended for development. The regulator, the law about regulator provides that money for connection and money allocated for development should be accumulated on different accounts. So we try to unite, to project the development and connection cost